Hello, I'm Rudranath Sanyal. Welcome to War and Peace, the country's longest-running television series on security matters. Once again, we thank all our viewers who watch our program regularly and keep in touch with us from different parts of the country and abroad. Well, viewers, many of you must have seen some of the breathtaking pictures of the latest military exercise in the deserts of Rajasthan. The pictures give us a sense of what a modern battlefield can really look like from the point of view of land forces in the current security environment. So, are the land forces still as significant in today's world as they have been down the ages? Let's find out by going into the import of some of those riveting pictures of the elaborate military exercise which was witnessed by the President of India, who, as you know, is also the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. So, our lead topic for you in this episode of War and Peace is import of land forces for maintaining peace. Our guests today are Lieutenant General Hriday Kaul, who was a veteran Armored Corps officer and was the General Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Army's Western Command that includes the deserts of Rajasthan. Lieutenant General Surendranath, a former veteran artillery officer who was also the Vice Chief of Army, and Major General Dipankar Banerjee, who was a veteran infantry officer and is now the mentor of the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies. We also have our representative, Pragya Paliwal Gaur, who has joined us from our Jaipur bureau. Let's begin with General Hriday Kaul. You were the General Officer Commanding of the Western Command, where the war exercise was witnessed. What do you think is the import of such exercise from the point of view of the Armored Corps? You've been a veteran Armored Corps officer yourself.
First of all, let me make it clear that any exercise is based on what you would do according to your role in war. So far as the operations are concerned on which we exercise during peacetime, it is basically an all-arms operation. Armored Corps, artillery, infantry, and services, and not only the all arms of the army, but combined with Air Force. And of course, you can't take the desert, you can't take the Navy to the desert, otherwise you would have had Navy along with them. Basically, being an all arms exercise in cooperation with the Air Force, so far as the Armed Corps is concerned, the main idea or the main aim of using armor, particularly in desert, is to enforce a decision in the battle, because armor is the one which delivers the final punch. Of course, with, as I said, the support of all other arms, because no single arm can achieve the aim of the overall commander.
Now to come to General Surendranath, as a veteran artillery officer, what would you say is the import of such exercises?
The primary role of artillery in such exercises or in actual operations of war will be to inflict heavy casualties on the enemy with this tremendous firepower that it has got. It demoralizes the enemy, it puts harassing fire on the enemy, it damages and destroys their installations, and above all, it provides very close and intimate fire support to the Armored Corps as well as to the artillery, the assaulting troops in all operations of war.
Right. General Dipankar Banerjee, you've been a veteran infantry officer, you are a div commander, but you are also the mentor of the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, and we are trying to analyze to what extent land forces and exercises such as these can actually work for peace.
This was a very vital series of exercises carried out on India's western borders, an exercise involving all the combat forces of the army, as well as the support of the Air Force. Of course, Navy could not be exercised in this particular context. And therefore, the Armored Corps, the artillery, and the infantry, the three principal combat arms of the army, carries out these operations as joint exercise, joint operations for the furtherance of the nation's operations or war plans. And keeping this alertness of defense capability and demonstrating this capability within the country and abroad helps maintain that sense of deterrence that will prevent all enemies of the country from attacking or launching any offensive against India, and hence maintain peace in India and its surrounding environment.
Okay, now let's straight away go over to Pragya Paliwal Gaur in Jaipur to find out what the military exercise was all about.
Today from Jaipur, we have a story on Sudarshan Shakti, the biggest military exercise undertaken by the Indian Army in the last 2 decades in the deserts of Rajasthan. 50,000 soldiers, 500 armored vehicles, including battle tanks, fighter jets, and combat helicopters of the Indian Air Force were deployed in the exercise. The basic objective of the exercise Sudarshan Shakti is to create a lean and agile fighting force and exploit technology and work in tandem with the Indian Air Force, hence ensuring our defense preparedness. During the exercise, simulated assaults were made by T-90, T-72 tanks and BMP fighting vehicles, with the artillery and the Air Force providing support in the endeavor. The Army is transforming itself into a more agile, versatile, lethal and network-centric force. Army officials have termed it as a trendsetter for the integrated theatre concept and has tried out new structures, strategic and test beds for an integrated, seamless air and land battle. With that, we take you back to our Delhi studios.
Okay, Pragya, we will come back to you. Please stay with us. But before that, let us analyze some of the other riveting pictures from the venue of the war exercise. The exercise simulated conditions to give the feel of some of the latest ingredients of a modern war theatre. On the one hand, the ground troops appeared in outstanding camouflage gears that stood out like regular bushes. On the other, there were fast-moving maneuvers by main battle tanks, closely followed by both mechanized columns and usual ground troops. Complete with smoke ammunition and formidable attack helicopters, the focus of these advanced moves seemed to be on the element of surprise. The enemy bunkers were to be destroyed as soon as the sound of the first grenade or gunshot was heard. As it should be in desert conditions, there was an array of battle tanks backed up by air power. While some of the age-old tools of traditional armies like automatic rifles were still visible, the invisible high-tech force multipliers like electronic warfare devices provided some vital cutting edges. Right. So, first of all, General Banerjee, what we noticed in that picture story was that elements like camouflage, maneuvers are so much more high-tech these days, so much more elaborate these days. But would you say that the other wings of the land forces, apart from the artillery, the armored corps and the infantry, they also play a visible or sometimes an invisible role, which is so important?
So in addition to what you saw of the armored corps, the artillery and the infantry, you have, of course, behind all of them, the other supporting elements that constitute a full combat battle element. And these include the combat engineers, the sappers, the communication element, which is the most vital aspect of modern war. And of course, nothing would move in the battlefield without an effective and combined logistics support. So what you see behind all this is also the backup of all these elements that go to constitute a comprehensive battle force.
Right. And to go back to General Hriday Kaul. General Hriday Kaul, as we said, you were the general officer commanding of that very theatre, the Western Command of the Army. What we noticed in that picture story was that, the kind of camouflage we saw, even soldiers didn't look like soldiers. In fact, they really moved as though, they were moving bushes. And at the same time, the maneuvers with all that mechanized infantry following the armored corps in, double quick time and with such precision. Do you think the war theatre has altered greatly?
They have altered, and they will continue to alter further. But let me tell you a little story just to liven up matters. Long ago, when I was a major, we were running an exercise, a similar one that you're talking of, and the divisional commander asked me, "You are from Armored Corps, what's the role of armor in battle?" So just to pull his leg, I said, "Sir, the role of armor is to lend some sense to what would otherwise be an infantry brawl." So that apart,
With a bit of levity, you said that, General.
but apart from that, what you asked, now I would first like to add something more, because some services have not been mentioned in today's conversation. Engineers, which Dipankar mentioned, but logistics he mentioned, basically ASC, but then you have the EME, the electrical mechanical engineers, who are responsible for recovery, immediate recovery of vehicles and equipment damaged and putting them back into fighting gear. And you also have ordnance and so on. So in short, it is every single element of the army, so far as land forces are concerned, combine themselves into one well-oiled machine to achieve the ultimate aim. And there comes also the air support in the desert, I mean. Apart from that, the alteration that you mentioned now, moving bush, is no camouflage, because the moment you see a bush moving, obviously there's someone moving the bush.
No, but the point was that
And
it
I understand.
perhaps moved for the benefit of the cameras, but,
Yes.
as long as it was still,
Quite
they were still the soldiers.
Absolutely.
They were just like, bushes,
Yes.
stationary bush.
Yes, not only that, there are certain things which are, apart from this sort of camouflage, for instance, infrared photography, which will capture what would otherwise not be obvious to the naked eye. So even anti-infrared technology has been introduced, and heat radiation, that is also camouflaged by various technological means. So that as technology advances, all these things get more and more sophisticated, and the whole aim is to fool the enemy, hide things he cannot locate by any of their technology, as much as we can help it. And apart from that, also to make him believe that certain weaponry exists in a place where there's no weaponry, again by technological means. So these are advances, and they will continue to grow and make the task of each side, it's a competitive basis, competitive battle. Whoever advances more has that much more advantage. Ultimately, it is the man behind all these guns and technology that matters the most. This, which many of us are likely and do forget at times in modern times.
Right. But, if a man in the street, a civilian, was to understand the value of land forces as the land forces have evolved down the ages, are they as important as they used to be earlier on? And do they play a visible and a clear role in maintaining global peace?
Very, very good question, I must say, because this has been asked many a times. I'll take you to World War I, take you back. When the Italian commander, air had just been introduced in battles, he said in future, Air Force will decide the outcome of wars. How wrong he's been proved in World War II and ever since in all other battles. Land battle, the land forces are essential, firstly, to decide the outcome of the battle, along, as I said initially, in conjunction with all other arms of the military. But ultimately, it is the land forces who will capture land. Air Force cannot capture. They can deny it for a short period. Nor can the Navy do. They can certainly deny certain areas from the sea. But it's the land forces, and that fear in the enemy acts as a preventer, as Dipankar said. if the enemy knows that our land forces are so strong, which will defeat their any intentions that they may have against our country, you will have peace. They dare not attack them. They dare not do any skirmishes, whether they are by regular forces or even these days, as you know, what is happening by non-regular forces.
Right.
So land forces are the primary group of forces which are essential to maintain peace, to make the enemy believe, or the future likely enemy believe, that they will be the losers and not gainers if they try any monkey tricks on our country.
Okay. Now to go back to our representative, Pragya Paliwal Gaur in Jaipur. Pragya, going by the most current war exercise, what do you think is the value of land forces, and this particular exercise, what is its true import?
This exercise is a byproduct of the study on transformational and theatrization of combat and support services of the Indian Army. The exercise is seen as a trendsetter as the Army is transforming itself.
Right. Thank you, Pragya. Now, General Dipankar Banerjee. Pragya Paliwal Gaur says that this military exercise was more about theaterization, as they say, the value of theaterization. What do you make of that?
It is the theatre concept of war where you have now realized that within the compass of a particular theatre of operations, you must have all your combat forces deployed in adequate numbers, in adequate form, and jointly trained in order to bring to bear the full force of military capability within the ambit of that particular theatre of operations. And the theatre of operations depicted during this particular exercise was the desert environment of India.
Right. And would it be so very different if the exercises were conducted during the peak of summer?
Well, the summer or winter does not really make too much of a difference. The terrain conditions make the difference, where the armor can bring to bear its full mobility or not, which will not be possible really in hilly or mountainous terrain. That will make a difference in the composition of forces that will be employed in that particular theatre. But weather or climate changes will not make too much of a difference in today's environment.
And General Banerjee, to ask you the same question again, actually, such a mega exercise, as they call it, elaborate, where all the wings of the land forces, the air force is also involved. And, lives are not lost. It is an exercise, but it is meant for military preparedness. But at the same time, it is believed that such exercises actually augur well for global peace.
Well, yes.
So how isn't it a kind of a paradox?
By demonstrating the full capability of the combat power that the Indian Armed Forces can bring to bear in a particular theatre of operations, you demonstrate that deterrence potential of the Indian Armed Forces. And once you demonstrate that effective deterrence potential, it deters all possible aggressors against you. And that in turn brings about peace and stability in your neighborhood and in your environment. And that in turn brings about regional and global peace.
Okay. And General Surendranath, General Paul spoke about these recovery units, the military army engineers who go and recover vehicles. And we saw in that picture story how it is quickly recovered by a helicopter. Right. So what do you think is going to be the shape and size of integrated approach and integrated maneuvers?
See, firstly, all these exercises, the formations of the Indian Army are so designed that they are self-sufficient in all aspects. It's a very composite organization, the fundamental organization being of a division, an infantry division or a mountain or armored division, in which you have elements of all arms and services which are required to support a particular operation of war. Now, amongst the elements, as you mentioned about the army aviation, this is another very important element which the army has got, and that provides close...
Along with the Air Force, actually.
Yeah, it works along with the Air Force, but basically it is meant to provide close observation, intelligence, as well as close fire support to the infantry or the armor which is going in for the attack. Then we have also another element which we didn't mention here was the Air Defense Corps, which has also got a very important role to provide air defense protection to our advancing column, particularly of the armored formations, and also to prevent the enemy air.
That is
the Army
air defense artillery. That is also
it used to be
artillery.
called Air Defense Artillery, but now it's called Air Defense Corps.
Right.
So they have their own organizations and their equipment. Then we have another important element is the Intelligence Corps, which provides the intelligence to all the formations at various levels. And so all these elements combined, they form a infantry division, which again at the higher headquarters, you have a corps headquarters, and then you have the army command headquarters like that. So basically all these formations are so integrated with each other, they are closely integrated, they are trained together, they know exactly what is their role in various operations of war, and the technology which is changing so rapidly, all these formations also are fully aware and conscious of their exact role which they have to play in various. So these exercises, in fact, while they act as a deterrence and while they help us in maintaining peace, but these exercises at this level help us in ensuring that our formation, that our army is fully trained at all times, geared up to take on their operational tasks at a very short notice. That is the main purpose of these exercises. And also they bring out certain lessons as far as technology is concerned, as far as the equipment is concerned, whether there are any shortcomings which you see while you are actually operating in the desert terrain or in whatever type of terrain the operations are carried out. So these are the advantages of these exercises.
Okay. We'll have more questions about the lessons that can be learned from such exercises.
Right.
But before that, we will take a quick break. You're watching War and Peace, the country's longest running television series on security matters. Please keep watching.
मैं तो सीधी सीधी बात करने वाला आदमी हूँ कि जिस जगह पे सत्य है वहाँ खुदा है, जिस जगह पे अहिंसा है वहाँ ईश्वर है।
Welcome back. You're watching War and Peace, your program on security matters. And in this edition of War and Peace, we are going into the import and significance of land forces that seem to play a major role in maintaining peace. So, General Hidayat Kaul, what, according to you, are some of the other lessons that can be learned from large-scale military exercises that mimic wars, but, are quite benign?
Well, they are benign in the sense that there is no actual war. Otherwise, there's nothing benign about it. Because two things I think your listeners must know. That we do have casualties during these exercises also. It is not that there is no casualty. And
that is casualty by way of accident, General.
That's right, accidents or certain things going wrong between our groups. That happens all day. Of course, they are not in the numbers like that would happen in war. There may be the odd casualty. 1, 2, 3, 4. Secondly, the second point I think your listeners should know is that a point which was earlier asked by you. Now, I have personally operated a huge force in the month of June, from 1st to 30th June in the desert. It makes a difference. I think that was the first time anyone had operated in such numbers in that month, when their heat is extreme. And in fact, our presence saved the lives of number of civilians who would have died otherwise, because every day people with temperatures of 106, 105, heat stroke, sunstroke were brought into our camps.
Like the well-known General Winter, we also have something called a General Summer,
That
according
is
to
right.
you.
In desert,
Right.
It is.
So
And
in that,
therefore-
maybe technology would play a still
Exactly.
more important role.
Yeah, that's what I wanted your listeners to know.
So General Dipankar Banerjee, what do you think would be some of the other lessons? And, you could give examples from other countries also.
The most important lesson from this particular major exercise in the desert was that you learned once again with the latest equipment that you have as to how to harmonize their activities and actions in the pursuit of your overall war objective. And so this harmonization process, this learning for integration, is always a continuous learning process. This has to be learned, practiced, and perfected through such exercises. And that brings it to a stage of perfection, which is required actually in combat. All other armies in the world do the same. They also learn similar lessons from their exercises. And we also sometimes have an opportunity to learn from their exercises and their lessons. And some of our lessons are also shared with some of our friendly countries. So there is a lot of synergy that is inbuilt into the development of these exercises and the practice of these war games, which helps to harmonize and hone our operational skills.
Okay. And General
I
Nath,
think
you have a point to add?
just to add a few other points. One is it helps us in refining our tactical doctrines, because you are practicing your operations of war in actual terrain with all these formations. So if there are any shortcomings in your tactical doctrine, that helps us in refining. Secondly, it helps commanders at various levels to exercise their command. That is very important, because they are the people who are going to lead their formations in war in actual.
How do you look at the future, General Surendranath?
No, as far as the future of training of our army formations are concerned, or maintaining peace at the borders is concerned, I think with all these exercises, plus with the diplomatic talks that we are having, we keep on having continuously with our neighbors and with other international organizations, ultimately I think it will lead to maintaining a peace at the borders.
General Banerjee, how do you look at the future?
Well, the future, I think, is very bright, with the backdrop of these very effective military exercises in the desert, and in the backdrop of our dialogue with our neighboring countries, where through diplomatic means and through dialogues on settlement of the border questions, we are moving forward in a positive direction to settle our disputes with our neighbors, at the same time moving forward economically as a nation, while always at the same time keeping our powders dry for any particular eventuality.
Right. Now, General Kaul, how do you look at the future?
I was born an optimist, and I continue to be an optimist. I think the future is full of promise. What we have to do to fulfill that promise for our country is sort out ourselves, because it's only ourselves which can defeat that promise or fulfill that promise.
So, on that note of positive direction, we come to the end of this edition of War and Peace, your program on security. If you wish to write to us, you can send an email to warandpeace@dd.nic.in. We have one more email address. Please note it down. It is warandpeace2004